Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to set out the case for Amendments 136, 150 and new clause 62 in my name. I'll also very pleased to hear what the Minister has said so far, but the bill in front of us seeks to tackle the long-standing conundrum of how to deliver the ambitious house-building targets that the Government's rightly committed to, whilst protecting the environment and enhancing, not reducing, protections for nature. Before I turn solely to my amendments, I'd like to speak briefly about the extent to which the bill achieves those aims. I absolutely share the Government's commitment to freeing up the planning system and ensuring that fewer people are unable to get onto the housing ladder, and that fewer children grow up in unsuitable, overcrowded and temporary accommodation. I see the impact of this country's failure to build the homes it needs in my surgeries every single week. And so I support the Government's aims to speed up that process. I also agree that planning has too often been a barrier to those ambitions, that the Government is absolutely right to attempt to remove this blocker. Freeing up unnecessary restrictions, however, must not mean allowing further nature degradation, and nor does it have to. The Government has said that these ambitions will be achieved alongside nature recovery. Wildlife populations in England have fallen to around 67% of their 1970 level, and Britain is now, as I said a few moments ago, one of the most nature-depleted places on earth. Most of England's rare and vulnerable habitats are in poor condition. Alongside building the homes and infrastructure that our society needs, we must rebuild our natural capital, the air, water, soils and biodiversity upon which our society depends. And this is why I will give way. Yeah.
And like me, he sounds like there's a deep passion there for ensuring that we maintain nature. So I was wondering whether the Honourable Member agrees with me that a simple measure would be to accept new clause 30, which extends permitted development rights for ponds up to 0.2 hectares, which would provide vital freshwater habitats for up to 2/3 of all freshwater species, exactly like he's been speaking about.
Well, I thank you very much for that intervention. I look forward to hearing her contribution in support of that new clause as we pass through. But I do think it has merit, something that's worth being considered, and I look forward to hearing her make her case in more detail as we go forward. The Environmental Audit Committee, which I chair, initiated an inquiry into housing growth and environmental sustainability to scrutinise government's proposals in national planning policy. Achieving growth and delivering for people, climate and nature together is a vital but challenging task. There are many provisions in this bill that I welcome, and I thank the Minister for his efforts and for his detailed engagement on this bill. I was grateful that he made time to meet recently to discuss the amendments that I proposed to this bill. Overall, I support the Government's intention in Part 3 of this bill. I think that those parties who wish to simply scrap the approach entirely are wrong, and I think it is right to introduce a more strategic approach to satisfying developers' environmental obligations. If done well, the environmental delivery plans and the nature restoration levy proposed in Part 3 could simplify and accelerate the process of meeting existing environmental requirements where developments impacts protected sites or protected species. Importantly, I also see the merit of this strategic approach in delivering larger scale and more effective nature conservation measures where development has unavoidable impacts on protected sites and protected species. However, the strength of concern from knowledgeable stakeholders should give the Government serious pause for thought. The Office of Environmental Protection, as was referred to earlier, published advice to the Government stating that the existing provisions in the bill would amount to a regression in environmental law. And so it is welcome that the Minister continues to be open-minded to making further amendments to his bill, and look forward to hearing about the engagement in another place when I'm certain there will be further amendments brought forward. Now, the Environmental Audit Committee has also heard evidence that there must be stronger safeguards in place for the proposed Nature Restoration Fund to genuinely deliver on its potential for nature. And my objective in tabling amendments to this bill is to engage constructively with the government's approach to Part 3 and to strengthen it so that it delivers for nature and development at the same time. I turn first to Amendment 136. I'm very much welcome what the Minister had to say about scientific safeguards, and I look forward to seeing what he comes forward with on that. This amendment would ensure that environmental delivery plans are only used where there is scientific evidence that they'll work. In other words, there must be robust evidence that a particular negative effect on a protected site or protected species can be mitigated or compensated for at a strategic level, rather than on a site-by-site basis. While strategic approaches that would be delivered by EDPs can work well for some habitats and species, such as nutrients or newts, they don't always work for others. And this amendment would safeguard against the EDP approach being applied to inappropriate species or habitats. The government has recognised this principle and has committed to a modular approach to expanding EDPs, with new plans applying feature by feature and existing protections remaining in place for those not yet covered. I support this approach and encourage the government to enshrine this principle in legislation to give certainty that this scientific safeguards committed to by this government cannot be altered by any future government without revisiting this legislation. On Amendment 150, we...